Noah Ellison stood frozen, hands in the air, badge still hanging from his neck, while the security guard yelled, "You don't look like a NASA engineer." It was his third week on the job. He'd just prevented a $750 million navigation failure. But now, backup was being called. And behind the glass, his own team was watching, doing nothing. What happened next would make national headlines, but not for the reasons you think. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below.
Noah Ellison stood in the polished corridor of Building 31 at NASA Goddard, badge clipped to a crisp, navy button-up that his mother had ironed 3 times the night before.
He'd rehearsed his greeting in the mirror, memorized the names of his project leads, even Googled their favorite coffee orders. He wasn't nervous. He was prepared. This day wasn't just a job. It was an arrival. The office buzzed with quiet mechanical energy. Monitors glowed with simulated trajectories, and endless lines of telemetry data. Scientists and engineers moved through the hallways with urgent grace, nodding politely but rarely stopping. This was a place for thinkers, not talkers. Noah liked that. He stepped into conference room E, a temporary orientation space for new hires. 6 people were seated. None of them looked like him. He knew that would be the case. NASA's diversity statistics didn't lie, but it still caught in his chest. That familiar feeling, hyper-visible, yet invisible all at once. Dr. Angela Price, his supervisor, stood to introduce him. She was one of the few black women in upper administration. Calm, sharp, professional. "This is Noah Ellison," she said with a proud, deliberate tone. "He's joining us from Caltech, specialized in adaptive flight software. He'll be assisting the Genesis Sequence project."
A few heads nodded, a few more stayed glued to their laptops.
Then it came, from the back corner, in a tone that danced the line between joke and jab. "Oh, so you got this job because you're black, right?" Travis Keegan, senior engineer, graying buzz cut, known for his sarcastic digs and old-school attitude. The kind of man who'd tell you with a smile he wasn't racist, just honest. The room reacted with a cocktail of discomfort. One engineer chuckled awkwardly. Another smirked and shook his head like, "Travis, man." No one said anything. No one stepped in. Noah kept his posture still, smile locked in place, pulse drumming in his ears. He turned slowly to Travis and said, with quiet steadiness, "No, I got this job because I'm better than most of the applicants. Statistically speaking." Angela gave Noah a quick glance, measured, supportive, but didn't address the comment, just pivoted. "Let's move on." But the comment didn't move on. It lingered. As the presentation continued, Noah sat at the edge of his seat, trying to focus on orbital drift algorithms while his mind spiraled through every possible response he could have given. Too aggressive, and he'd confirm their biases. Too passive, and he'd fade into the stereotype of the grateful hire. By lunch, Noah knew. This wasn't going to be about the work. Not really. In the cafeteria, he chose a table in the corner, alone. From across the room, Travis pointed toward him and whispered something to another engineer. Laughter followed. He could only imagine the punchline. At 3:15 p.m., Angela handed him his first real assignment, reviewing back-end telemetry logs from a test simulation run 2 weeks ago. Most engineers would see this as grunt work, but Noah saw it as opportunity. He stayed late. Everyone else left, even Angela. The building dimmed to half-light, humming with empty silence. And that's when he found it. A series of time-stamped anomalies in the nav sequence simulation. Tiny data drifts, milliseconds out of alignment. Barely noticeable, but enough to suggest a systemic error in the flight pattern recalculation model. Noah dug deeper, cross-referenced logs, rebuilt the sequence matrix from scratch. The error wasn't new. It had been there for 3 years. 3 years, missed, ignored, or worse, buried. A small enough glitch to avoid catastrophic failure, but large enough to skew every predictive model used in the Genesis project's orbital testing. The kind of flaw that could delay a launch, or destroy a reputation. And here was the twist. The original patch that introduced the error? Authored by Travis Keegan. Noah stared at the screen, pulse steady now. The comment from earlier that morning echoed in his head. "You got this job because you're black, right?" He closed his laptop, backed up the logs to a private drive, and looked around the empty office. He had a choice to make, and as he stood there, one thought crossed his mind. This wasn't just about fixing code. It was about fixing silence. Noah didn't say a word the next morning. But by then, someone else had already accessed the logs overnight and quietly deleted the most damning file. That night, Noah barely slept. He lay in the same tiny DC apartment he'd scraped together with his NASA relocation stipend, bare mattress, 2 chairs, and a folding table that still had the sticker on the leg. The soft glow of his laptop screen flickered across his face as he replayed the day again and again. The stairs, the missing file. And underneath it all, something deeper. A familiar ache. Not anger. He was used to anger. This was something worse. Something quieter. A heaviness that had followed him his entire life. Because for Noah Ellison, genius had never been enough. In 9th grade, he was the only black kid in AP Physics. His teacher, Mr. Lachlan, kept accidentally calling him Devon, the name of a student who dropped the class 2 weeks in. When Noah corrected him, Lachlan would just smile and say, "Right, sorry, so many of you this year." There were only 2 black students in the entire honors program. At 16, he'd built his first autonomous drone from salvaged laptop fans and second-hand motherboard scraps he found at a tech recycling event. The drone flew 6 blocks before crash landing into a police cruiser. They didn't arrest him, but they did make him sit on the curb in handcuffs for 30 minutes while they verified his intentions. His mother, Marlene Ellison, worked nights at a senior care center and took day shifts cleaning houses in Georgetown. She told him early on, "You'll have to be twice as good for half the credit. And even then, they might still treat you like you cheated to get there." That line never left him. He never got into fights, never talked back, never missed a deadline. His GPA was 4.7. His SAT score, 1570. Valedictorian. Full ride to Caltech. The only kid from his district to ever make it that far. At Caltech, professors would praise his models, then question whether he was getting outside help. During his 3rd semester, he discovered that a group of white classmates had copied his code, line for line, on a joint propulsion assignment, and submitted it 2 days early. He reported it. The professors handled it quietly. They got a warning. He got suspicion. So he stopped reporting things. He stopped reacting. Instead, by graduation, he held 3 independent publications in leading aerospace journals, including a widely circulated paper on adaptive flight systems under atmospheric drag conditions, a paper that caught the attention of Dr. Angela Price at NASA. She called him personally, told him his brain reminded her of what the space program used to dream about, said she wanted to hire him before someone else did. And now, on his first day at NASA, they thought he was just a box checked off on someone's DEI initiative. The next morning, Noah walked into the office with a calm, deliberate rhythm. He passed by Travis Keegan, who barely looked up from his coffee. The words from yesterday hung like a stain. But Noah didn't stop walking. He wasn't here to argue. He logged into his workstation, reopened the logs, only to find the most critical anomaly file had been wiped, not moved. Deleted. Timestamps erased. Access logs scrubbed. Someone knew. Someone had seen what he saw, and someone didn't want him credited. At 9:46 a.m., Angela walked by his desk and gave him a nod that said, "You okay?" He nodded back. Not because he was okay, but because he didn't trust what might come out of his mouth if he spoke. At lunch he sat on the rooftop, away from the stairs, away from the rumors he could feel forming like storm clouds. He pulled out his phone and opened the voice message archive. He scrolled down past old birthday songs from his mom, past his graduation party speeches, until he found it. July 12, 2020. The day he got his Caltech acceptance letter. He'd been too stunned to speak, so his mom had taken the phone and recorded a message instead. "Noah, baby, don't let them shrink you. You hear me? Some of them won't like you just because you show them what they could never be. That's not your burden. Let them see you shine, and if they don't clap for you, you clap louder." He sat with that for a moment, because what scared them wasn't just that he was good. It was that he was better. Better than Travis. Better than most of them. And better with the kind of quiet, unshakable brilliance they couldn't explain or claim. He realized something then. Something sharp. They didn't hate that he was there. They hated that he belonged there. Because if someone like him could find and fix a 3-year flaw in one night, what else could he prove? And who would lose face in the process? He opened a private Git folder and began documenting everything. Every discrepancy, every data point, every line of code he'd rebuilt. Not for revenge, for he didn't need them to like him. He needed them to respect what they couldn't deny. As he uploaded the first set of recovered log files to an encrypted backup, a system alert blinked onto his screen. Access denied, user locked out. Someone had just revoked his clearance. The lockout lasted exactly 38 minutes. 38 long, quiet minutes during which Noah sat frozen in front of his screen, pretending to scroll through data he no longer had access to. Around him, the buzz of activity carried on as if nothing was wrong. Keystrokes clicked. Screens flickered. Engineers argued softly over equations. But inside, Noah was a pressure chamber. He didn't panic. He observed. Then at 10:24 a.m., his access was suddenly restored. No email, no message, no explanation, just back, like it had never happened. A ghost glitch. Except he knew better. It was a warning. That afternoon, the Genesis Sequence Planning Committee met on the 6th floor, room 6B, one of those sterile modern NASA conference spaces, with wall-sized monitors and chairs that cost more than his first car. 10 people sat around the oval table. He was the 11th. Angela introduced the session. Today we're reviewing proposed redundancies for the autonomous guidance loop on Phase 2. We're opening the floor to ideas. Noah, notes in hand, waited until the discussion slowed before speaking. Calm, precise, backed by data. I've run simulations on the current vector adjustment logic. If we introduce a micro-lag buffer of 0.25 seconds into the loop, we can reduce overcorrection drift by nearly 40%. It won't affect fuel efficiency but could improve path stability. Silent. Not disagreement. Just silent. People shifted in their chairs. One engineer cleared his throat. Another tapped on their tablet, not looking up. Angela glanced at him briefly. Unreadable. Then, a moment later, Dr. Raj Menon, systems analyst, spoke. Actually, he said slowly, has anyone considered introducing a buffer lag into the adjustment loop? Maybe 0.2. The room lit up.
That could work.
Yeah, especially if we test it during the warm start sequence. Angela nodded, scribbling notes. Raj, mock that up and send a summary before Friday.
No one mentioned Noah.
He didn't react. He didn't push. But something inside shifted. This wasn't the first time. 2 weeks earlier, he'd proposed recalibrating a key failsafe in the nav engine's redundancy circuit. It had been brushed off with a polite, let's circle back. Days later, another engineer, white, older, louder, pitched the exact same adjustment and was praised for thinking outside the box. It was a pattern. His ideas didn't die because they were wrong. They died because they came from him. And each time someone else resurrected them, they were met with applause. Noah started keeping a log quietly, methodically. Date, time, idea, and who got credit. Not out of spite, out of self-preservation, a record of erasure. But today, the stakes were different. Later that evening, Noah stayed behind, scanning the Genesis flight models. It had become routine now. His best thinking happened when the halls were empty, and the noise had died down. He ran a new simulation, something that had been bothering him since Raj's breakthrough. The model showed a minor but consistent divergence in the nav trajectory. He adjusted inputs, ran it again, still off. He tweaked the orbital inclination settings, ran it again. Worse. Then he saw it, buried deep in the sublayer of the navigation model, a piece of legacy code that hadn't been updated in 2 firmware cycles, a misalignment in the error margin buffer. It meant that the system could miscalculate its position by up to 3.6 kilometers after the 3rd correction loop. That didn't just mean drift. It meant the spacecraft could miss its re-entry window entirely. And the upcoming test flight was only 10 weeks away. He leaned back, staring at the blinking line of code. Heart steady. Jaw tight. This wasn't just an opportunity to speak up. It was a moral obligation. He drafted a report. Clean, technical, devoid of emotion. Just numbers and consequences. Then he sent it to Angela, to Raj, to the entire systems team. He stayed late again, expecting a reply. Some acknowledgement. None came. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even a read receipt. The following morning, during another team huddle, Raj spoke again. I've noticed some concerning deviation patterns in the nav model, he said. Specifically in the re-entry simulation. We might be overdue for a legacy code audit. Angela raised her eyebrows. That could be serious. Can you head that up? Noah's chest went tight. The words he'd written. The flaw he'd discovered. Now rebranded as someone else's insight. Again. And no one said his name. He waited until after the meeting and confronted Angela privately. I sent that report, he said, keeping his voice even. The one Raj brought up. 2 days ago. She blinked. I didn't see it. I CC'd the whole team. She hesitated. Maybe it got flagged, or lost in the thread. I'll look into it. But her eyes said something else. They said, don't push this. He walked away, stomach hollow. The walls around him weren't made of brick or steel. They were made of silence, of redirection, of 1,000 micro-denials that added up to one big erasure. And still he showed up. He worked harder. He stayed later, because he knew what was coming next. And this time, if they ignored him, the consequences wouldn't just be offensive. They'd be fatal. That night, as he reviewed the latest model again, a warning popped up on his screen. Test flight scheduled, no code updates allowed after lock. They were sealing the model flaw and all into the launch protocol. And no one had read his report. The model lock was permanent. The clock had started ticking. Noah stared at the warning on his screen, as if it might change its mind. No code updates allowed after lock. In aerospace terms, that meant irreversible. It meant the model, flawed and all, was now part of the official pre-launch protocol. From this point forward, only major mission leads could initiate an override, and only in emergency scenarios. And yet, no one had flagged the miscalculation. Noah leaned in, scrolling line by line through the code, determined to retrace every logic node. His eyes caught it again, a tiny decimal shift in the drag coefficient calculation. A simple floating point error in the subread. It looked innocuous, just a misplaced number, likely due to a copy-paste oversight 3 years ago, when the model was migrated between frameworks. But the implications were enormous. This one misalignment compounded itself over thousands of recalculations in the simulated model. And in real-world applications, it could cause misfire trajectories, unstable mid-course corrections, and worst of all, mission-critical system drift during re-entry. The Genesis sequence wasn't just any mission. It was supposed to be NASA's most precise autonomous vehicle deployment yet, a test flight to prove near-Earth vehicle transfer, under minimal human supervision. The first step towards scalable, AI-managed orbiting satellites, and it was built on an unstable foundation. Noah double-checked his findings, then checked them again. His fingers moved quickly, but carefully across the keyboard as he wrote a parallel script, a fix that would subtly correct the faulty decimal and restabilize the trajectory model, without altering the locked structure too overtly. He wasn't trying to sneak around the system. He was trying to stop a disaster. Still, he knew what this would look like. Junior engineer makes unauthorized change. There were people in that building who'd love to frame it as recklessness, insubordination, or worse, arrogance. But letting the mistake go unfixed, that would be complicity. So he executed the correction. Quietly, cleanly, he inserted the script as a runtime override, one that wouldn't show in the locked architecture, but would take effect during the next dry run simulation. Then he documented everything. He saved the logs in 3 different locations, 2 private, 1 encrypted cloud backup. He sent 1 copy to Angela, marked urgent in the subject line, and another to a general project safety inbox NASA used for internal whistleblower reports. That one was anonymous. He didn't sleep that night. The following morning, everyone gathered in the secondary mission control room for the dry run simulation. It was a full room: project leads, flight engineers, analysts, and a few external observers from other departments. A wall-sized screen tracked real-time nav data, while smaller monitors displayed system behavior diagnostics. Noah sat in the back, near the telemetry table. Angela opened the simulation with a calm confidence, running final trajectory verification, sequence gamma delta. The countdown began, initializing orbital launch parameters, engaging nav correction loop. Noah's code kicked in silently, seamlessly, and then stability. The nav module corrected perfectly. No erratic drift, no spike in resource burn. The re-entry window projection fell within 0.01% of optimal. Angela looked surprised but impressed. Looks like we've got clean data this time, Raj said, nodding. Buffering must have stabilized the adjustments. Everyone clapped. Noah didn't. Not because it wasn't a victory, but because no one knew what he'd done. And within an hour, the post-simulation review hit the internal bulletin board. Nav model optimization attributed to buffer redesign by systems engineering team. Lead contributors Raj Menon, Kara Lin, Dr. Angela Price. No mention of the decimal correction. Noah scrolled to the bottom of the internal memo. His name wasn't there. He checked his inbox. No acknowledgement. No questions. No follow-up. Later that day, Raj walked past him in the hallway and nodded, casual and cool, as if they were teammates celebrating the same win. Noah didn't stop him. What would he even say? But what came next was worse. By 4:15 p.m., a new update was pushed to the nav model repository. Noah opened it, scanned the lines. His override was gone. Deleted. And the original, flawed decimal, reintroduced. At first he thought maybe someone had reset the repository by accident, but the commit note said otherwise. Reverted unnecessary patch to maintain original model integrity. Authored by Travis Keegan. Travis. Again. The same man who made the diversity hire comment on Noah's first day. The same man who wrote the original flawed code 3 years ago. He had not only erased the fix, he had justified it as unnecessary. Noah stared at the screen, a strange mixture of fury and disbelief crawling through his veins. He wasn't just being ignored now, he was being undone. This wasn't incompetence, it was sabotage, dressed in procedure. And the worst part? It worked. Because when mistakes hide behind bureaucratic language and legacy code, no one asks questions, especially not if the person raising the alarm looks like him. He sat at his desk, heart pounding, vision tight. If that decimal stayed, the real launch could fail. Maybe not immediately, maybe not even noticeably, but it would fail. And now, he was the only one who knew. That night, as Noah reviewed the access logs, he spotted something that made his stomach drop. His fix had been flagged before the simulation even began. Someone had known it was there, and someone had been watching him. The sun hadn't risen yet when Noah pulled into the NASA Goddard parking lot. He sat in his car for a full 10 minutes, engine off, laptop bag still in the back seat, just staring at the building. It looked the same, sleek, imposing, futuristic, but to Noah it had come to feel more like a fortress, one built not to protect, but to keep people like him outside its real walls. Inside, the air was still cool from overnight circulation. The early team trickled in. Noah logged into his station, scanned his notifications. Nothing. No follow-up on the decimal overwrite. No response to the data he'd compiled. No questions, no corrections. Just silence. Again, he replayed the access logs in his mind. The line of code had been flagged before the simulation. The implication was clear. Someone knew what he had done before the test had even started. And still, after the results came in, they reverted the fix anyway, not because it was wrong, but because of who made it. By noon, the notification came in. Annual performance review. 3. Noah straightened his desk, checked his report archive, reviewed every completed ticket, logged overtime hours, listed contributions to system stability and redundancy optimizations. He even included the test model improvement he authored, though officially uncredited. He walked into conference room D6, 3 minutes early. Angela was already there, seated across from a square table, a manila folder in front of her. She looked calm but tired, not angry, not warm, neutral, like a judge who didn't want to be in court. "Hey," Noah greeted, keeping his voice low. "Hi, Noah. Sit down." He did. She opened the folder. "This is your mid-year formal. Just protocol." "Sure," he said. She glanced at the page. "Your technical work has been solid. On time. Your modeling's tight. Simulation's clean. I've noted your late hours too. You're dependable." That word sat wrong. "And yet," she continued, "there's some feedback I'm obligated to include." Noah blinked. "Feedback?" Angela hesitated. She looked at the paper, not him. "There have been concerns around initiative." His posture didn't change, but inside something lurched. "What kind of concerns?" he asked carefully. Angela's voice was firm, practiced. "While your individual work is strong, there's a consensus that you're not demonstrating the kind of proactive leadership we look for in next-stage candidates. You're precise, but not dynamic." He almost laughed, but it wouldn't have come out funny. "I submitted 2 improvement reports on the nav model that got picked up after I wrote them," he said evenly. "And both were implemented." "I understand," she said, "but the system shows them as team discoveries. And you didn't follow up." "I was locked out after the first one," he said. "My access was cut." Angela nodded slowly, as if she already knew that. "There's no log showing a formal complaint. Because formal complaints die in inboxes, Noah wanted to say, or get rerouted, or mysteriously deleted. Instead, he just asked, "So where does that leave me?" Angela closed the folder. "Right now, we're recommending you stay in your current role another cycle. Keep contributing. Let your presence settle. Be more visible in meetings. Collaborate more." "Collaborate," he repeated. "You mean, let someone else speak my work?" Angela met his eyes for the first time. "No. I mean, let them see you working with others. It's not always about being right first. It's about the team trusting you're right together." He stood up before she could continue. "Thanks," he said. Outside the room, the hallway felt tighter, louder. The hum of machines was background noise to the rush of blood in his ears. He passed Raj, who gave him a small smile. "Hey, review day, huh? Good luck, man." Noah just nodded. 30 minutes later, an email pinged the department. "Congratulations to Travis Keegan on his promotion to assistant lead engineer, navigation systems." Noah read it twice. Travis. The same man who reintroduced the decimal error. The same one who had mocked him his first day, who got credit for work he didn't do, and who had scrubbed Noah's override with the note about unnecessary patches. Promoted. He scrolled to the bottom of the announcement. "For consistent leadership, strong communication, and contributions to model integrity." Noah didn't get angry. He got still.
This wasn't about competence. It never had been.
It was about comfort. He made people uncomfortable by being quiet, by being precise, by being black and better and not apologizing for either. Angela's review echoed in his head. Good attitude but not leadership material. It wasn't even coded. It was just dressed up, tamed, sanitized. He thought of his mother again. That voicemail. Make them see what they missed. They didn't miss it.
They saw it. They just chose to bury it.
At 5:02 p.m., an internal message pinged his inbox, misrouted. Not meant for him. It was from Raj, sent to Travis. "Hey, I deleted the temp logs just in case. No trace of the patch left. He'll back off eventually." Noah started to notice it in the spaces between things. Not in meetings. Not in performance reports. But in the silences that fell just as he entered a room. In the quick shift of conversations. The downward glances. The performative smiles that stretched too wide and fell too quickly. In the lab hallway, he once passed two engineers. Both mid-levels, both white, laughing over something on a phone. As he walked by, one of them nudged the other and said just loudly enough, "Well, it's not like he had to compete for the spot." The other replied, "Nah, he's one of those equity hires, that new DEI pipeline thing." Laughter. Quick, dirty. Noah didn't stop. Didn't flinch. But he heard it. Felt it coil under his skin like static. In the break room, it was worse. He entered just as a conversation ended, and 5 heads scattered in different directions. Cups suddenly needed filling. Phones had to be checked. Chairs squeaked as people shifted away. One engineer left entirely, coffee unfinished. He stood there, alone, pouring water into his thermos, while eyes flicked and voices resumed. Softer, safer. The worst part? It wasn't new. He'd survived this before in school, in internships, even during a summer fellowship in Houston. But here at NASA, it hit different. It wasn't supposed to happen here. Here the work was supposed to speak louder than the labels. And yet the whisper followed him through every corridor like a second badge, diversity pick. Angela didn't say it. Raj didn't say it. But they didn't challenge it either. He saw it in how people responded to his ideas, how his suggestions were always interesting until someone else presented them. Then suddenly they were brilliant. How his quiet confidence read as arrogance. How his precision became intimidating. They didn't need to call him incompetent. They just had to suggest he didn't earn it. Noah kept his head down. Mostly. But the final straw came during a lab demo the following Thursday. He was presenting a diagnostic tool he'd written to detect micro-latency in the nav communication loop. A simple console-run program, small, efficient, but powerful. It could catch system hiccups in real time without needing a full model reboot. He explained the utility, showed results, and then waited. The room sat quiet. Raj nodded but said nothing. One engineer asked, "Did someone else vet this?" Another added, "Looks good in theory. We'll have to benchmark it against our standard tools." The discussion shifted. 5 days later, a variation of his tool, barely altered, was credited to another engineer, Thomas. The version was bulkier, slower, less accurate. But it came with a white face and a louder voice, and so it won the room. Noah said nothing, because by now he understood something crucial. They weren't interested in the best solution. They were interested in the most familiar one. The old boys' club hadn't vanished. It had just learned to speak in softer tones and document in passive voice. That Friday, Travis joked loudly near the lab door. "Man, DI really changed the game. Now you just gotta look right to get in. Crazy." No one laughed. But no one said anything either. It was enough. Noah walked past him without a word. But inside he was counting down, because sooner or later, silence runs out of places to hide. And that moment came the following Tuesday. Unexpected, messy, and in full view of the entire department. The Genesis simulation was live again. This time a critical systems stress test meant to validate multiple navigation sequences under load. Every department had a lead monitoring station. Angela stood at the primary console. Raj was logged into backup diagnostics. Noah had been moved to a peripheral station. Low priority. But with access to raw telemetry, it was the kind of assignment they gave interns and sideline staff. At 2:07 p.m., something flickered on his screen. A lag. He leaned forward. The buffer loop had failed to reset. The command sent through the communication relay had bounced back. A glitch in the failsafe trigger. Small, almost invisible, but enough to freeze the autocorrect sequence. The nav system had stalled. He looked up. Angela frowned at her monitor. "Pause sequence," she said into the mic. "Something's wrong," Raj added. "Control isn't responding." Panic didn't break out. But the room went tense. The nav sequence was locked. The system wouldn't respond to override commands. If this were live flight, the failure would force an abort. Or worse, a blind burn into deep orbit. Noah stood. "I can fix it," he said calmly. Angela glanced at him. "What?" "I built a diagnostic runner for this. It can force a recursive buffer clear and re-enable communication without a full reboot." Raj frowned. "That's risky. The loop could short out if the timing's off." "I know the timing. It's micro-based. I wrote it." Angela hesitated. She looked around the room, silent. Then she nodded. "Do it." Noah sat down and typed fast. Clean. He accessed the subroutine through a back door in the model, something he'd quietly written weeks earlier. He initiated the runner. The room watched. 3 seconds. Then the screen blinked. Communication channel restored. The system roared back to life. Angela stared at the screen. Raj leaned in, almost stunned. Someone clapped. Then another. The room lit up with relief. Angela turned to him. "That was how did you—" "I was ready," Noah said. He didn't smile. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, every whisper collapsed under the weight of cold, undeniable fact. He was the only one who could have done it. The next morning, Angela received an email titled, "Unformalized Override Protocol Flag. Investigation Pending." And it listed only one name, Noah Ellison. Noah stood in the far left corner of the control center, back straight, badge swinging slightly from his neck as he watched the room vibrate with restrained nerves. Every screen glowed. Every engineer was locked in. This was it, the final pre-launch simulation before the actual flight of the Artemis Pathfinder, NASA's crown jewel, a $750 million autonomous shuttle project, set to redefine mid-orbit payload delivery. And all of it, every second, every inch of its trajectory, depended on a recalibration algorithm Noah had written in the solitude of late nights and locked out logins. But no one knew that. At least, not publicly. Officially, the system patch that now governed the guidance loop had been collaboratively refined by the navigation team. Unofficially, it was Noah's hands that had crafted the fix. The same hands that had caught the decimal flaw, coded the correction, and rebuilt the dynamic trajectory model from the ground up. He wasn't even supposed to be in the room. His name had been removed from the simulation ops list 3 days earlier. It was Angela who'd quietly put him back on, handing him a laminated temp pass and whispering, "Don't say anything, just watch." The countdown began. Initializing core systems. All green. Running nav check sequence. Telemetry is clean. Fuel burn algorithms locked. Pathfinder is go for simulated ignition. Noah's fingers curled around the edge of his station. His code was already running, buried in the subroutine that governed lateral adjustment logic and orbit recalibration. It would engage precisely at T plus 72 seconds, during the first artificial gravity fluctuation phase. If it failed, the shuttle would destabilize again, and this time, in front of press, observers and project stakeholders watching live across the country. Angela stood by the launch director, arms folded tight. Raj watched from the backup console, nervously tapping his pen. T-72 seconds. The nav loop engaged. The shuttle simulation leaned into its burn. The lateral stabilizers adjusted. The buffer kicked in, precise, seamless. The data didn't spike. No drift. No overcorrect. The entire room inhaled. Then, silence. For 2 seconds, followed by the launch director's quiet, stunned voice. Trajectory nominal. Confirming orbital path match. A beat. Then, confirmed. Simulated launch successful. And then, applause. Thunderous. Palms hitting palms. Shouts of yes, and we got it. Angela closed her eyes for a second. Just one. And then nodded. Noah stayed seated. No one turned to him. No hand reached over to shake his. The celebration wasn't his to participate in, only to witness. The press release went out 3 hours later. NASA Artemis Pathfinder clears final test. Navigation system fully operational after team recalibration. Lead engineers: Raj Menon, Kara Lynn, Dr. Angela Price. Noah's name wasn't mentioned.
Not once.
Not for the code. Not for the buffer fix. Not for the decimal correction that had prevented an orbital disaster months earlier. And certainly not for the override script that had saved the dry run days ago. By morning, the article had made it to the front page of multiple aerospace sites. Raj gave interviews. Kara was featured in a short documentary about women in space systems. Angela received an internal award for department leadership. Noah got a firm handshake from a deputy director as he passed him in the hall. "Good job hanging in there, kid," he said, as if Noah had simply survived the process, not solved it. That night, Noah sat alone in his apartment again. Laptop open, scanning his own code, the lines that had saved a $750 million mission. There was no signature, no watermark, just logic. Clean, perfect logic. He pulled up the version history, checking the timestamps again. His patches, his corrections, his buffer loop. All live, all untouched, and all attributed to someone else. He scrolled to the internal recognition system, NASA's internal platform for employee contributions. There were dozens of new endorsements. Team excellence. System stabilization brilliance. All for the nav team. He searched his name. Nothing. Then, as he prepared to shut the screen, a new notification popped in. Performance highlight. Raj Menon, recognized for identifying legacy code anomaly in Artemis system. Noah blinked. Legacy code anomaly. They were calling his decimal catch Raj Insight. He leaned back slowly, eyes locked on the ceiling. It wasn't just theft. It was history being rewritten in real time. And just as he closed the browser, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then picked up. A calm voice on the line said, "I saw what you did, Noah. And I have something you need to see. Meet me tomorrow. Alone." The number was unlisted. The voice was unfamiliar. But the tone wasn't hostile. It was precise, controlled, and that intrigued Noah more than anything. "I'm not trying to trap you," the voice had said. "But if you want proof, actual irrefutable proof, they knew all along. Meet me at the bench near the observation dome." Knew. Then the line went dead. Noah didn't sleep. He spent most of the night scanning the internal directories, trying to match the voice to any contact he'd interacted with recently. Nothing. He even rechecked his building's security logs, hoping to find anything out of place. Still nothing. By noon he stood outside the dome. The bench overlooked one of the lesser-known satellite test bays, quiet and windswept, tucked behind a row of trees that blocked most surveillance cameras. A woman sat there already. Mid-30s, sharp gray blazer, laptop bag slung across her shoulder like it hadn't moved in hours. Noah slowed as he approached. She didn't look up, just reached into her bag and slid something across the bench, a black USB drive. He sat, didn't touch it yet. "Who are you?" "I work in comms," she said, still not looking at him. "Or I did. I'm on leave now. Let's say, I've seen a few things that made me stop drinking the Kool-Aid." Noah kept his hands folded. "What is it?" She finally turned to him. Her expression wasn't friendly. But it wasn't cold either. "It's the email thread," she said. "The one they scrubbed." Noah blinked. "From when?" 3 months ago, after your first decimal correction. You sent it to Angela. She forwarded it up. Noah's pulse jumped. They said they never got it. Oh, they got it, she said. They just didn't want it. He picked up the drive. What's on it? She stood, smoothing her blazer. Read the thread. The last line is the part that'll burn. Then she walked away. Noah waited until he was alone, then took the drive straight to his apartment. He opened a private offline laptop and loaded the contents. One folder, titled Internal Nav Model Response Chain. Inside, a dozen emails. The first one was his own. Subject: decimal discrepancy in buffer loop. Urgent. To Angela Price. Date: 3 months ago. Attached was his detailed breakdown, code comparison, projected impact, and recommendations. The second email, from Angela Price. To Travis Keegan. Raj Menon. Kara. Subject: FWD. Decimal discrepancy from Ellison. She added one line. Can someone validate this before we stir the pot? Then it unraveled. Raj reply. Looks like a minor inconsistency. We can patch in a quieter update. No need to escalate. Travis replied next. Let's hold. This might complicate optics. We've been pushing model integrity for months. Then came Kara. Also, Ellison? Is he even cleared to propose structural edits? Angela responded. Technically, yes. But we don't need to open this up right now. Let's loop it into the next team update and fold it into a broader review. And finally, the last email. The one that made Noah's stomach twist. From Travis Keegan. To all. Subject: Rai. Decimal discrepancy from Ellison. Let's not credit the intern. Keep it in-house. That was it. No summary. No follow-up. No correction. Noah stared at the screen. Reread the line. Let's not credit the intern. But he wasn't an intern. He was a full-time engineer. On payroll. With clearance. With authorship.
They knew it. All of them.
And still they erased him. Not by accident. Not by oversight. But by design. He clicked through the rest of the folder, screenshot proof that the email chain existed. Metadata intact. Undeniable. And it had all been deleted from the central archive a week after the Pathfinder Success press release. Noah sat back, the weight of it crashing over him. This wasn't just personal. This was cultural. Systemic. He had the evidence now. Not just of bias, but of coordinated silence. It wasn't just that they didn't want his name attached. It was that they couldn't afford it to be. Because if the equity hire had caught what their entire systems team missed for 3 years, what would that say? What would that undo? Noah opened his journal, his backup documentation log, and added the drive contents. He encrypted it, saved it again, sent a copy to a private secure email server. And just as he finished, his screen blinked. New internal memo. Nav Systems Presentation Update. Subject: Contributors for Artemis Pathfinder Technical Symposium. Names listed. Raj Menon. Carolyn. Travis Keegan. Not Angela. Not Noah. At the bottom of the memo, another note. External media inquiries to be routed through PR before release of personnel involvement. No additional names to be disclosed without clearance. And for the first time, Noah saw it clearly. They weren't ignoring him. They were erasing him. There were no alarms, no confrontations, no sudden blow-ups in meetings. Retaliation at NASA didn't wear brass knuckles. It wore silence, policy, and bureaucratic precision. It started with the calendar. One Monday morning, Noah opened his project dashboard and noticed half his meetings had disappeared, briefings he had attended every week for months gone. He checked his permissions, still active, checked the list of attendees. His name, once second or third on every call sheet, was now nowhere to be found. Then came the assignments. 2 weeks earlier, he had been listed as co-lead on a systems optimization branch for the Artemis expansion module. But when the task flow was updated, his name had been swapped out. No explanation, just replaced. Quietly. Angela didn't mention it. Neither did Raj. Then, 3 days later, his desk was moved. Department reorganization, said the email from facilities. His new seat was a corner slot in the overflow bullpen, wedged near the mechanical testing interns, far from the mission planning floor where he'd always worked. It had no dual monitors, no secure terminal access, and no one seated within 4 stations of him. He stared at the chair. A single crooked post-it stuck to the edge of the desk. Reserved Ellison, in someone's rushed handwriting. It was a demotion without a title change. The kind no one said aloud, but everyone saw. On Wednesday, he found that his system login had been downgraded. Access denied. Files grayed out. Archives locked. Tools he had coded himself were now marked admin only. And when he tried to submit a diagnostic request, a red error flashed back. User not authorized for this function. Noah took a screenshot. Then another. And another. By Friday, word had spread. Not about what he'd done, but about what he'd become. Too loud. Too sharp. Too dangerous. The new narrative circulated like smoke in a sealed room. Isn't he the one who leaked that decimal thing? He's trying to get people fired. Yeah, he's got an agenda. Comes in out of nowhere. Tries to flip the table. And worst of all, he's a liability now. Not officially. Not written down. But whispered. It was the same tone from his first week, but deeper now. Louder. Hardened by resentment. They didn't mind his intelligence when it made them look good. But once it started uncovering flaws, once it threatened their credit, their prestige, that's when the real machine turned on him. He'd heard it before. At Caltech, at his aerospace internship in Huntsville. At every level, the pattern repeated. Admire him in silence. Isolate him in private. This time, though, he wasn't alone. The whistleblower, the woman from comms, hadn't just vanished after giving him the USB. Her name was Maya Channing, and she reached out again, carefully, through encrypted messages and burner accounts. I've seen this before, she wrote. Not just you. This is bigger. She wasn't talking about office politics. She was talking about a pattern spanning years, missions and departments. Black engineers getting buried. Latino analysts sidelined. Indigenous data scientists erased mid-project and rewritten out of published papers, not in headlines, but in footnotes or lack thereof. Maya had receipts. Dozens. And now, so did Noah. He compiled everything. Every denied login. Every stripped assignment. Every internal memo that named others for work he authored. Every email. Every voice memo. Every project where he'd been airbrushed out of history. He backed them up across 3 encrypted drives, sent mirror copies to 2 external addresses, and stored one in a physical vault at a friend's firm downtown. If they wanted to bury him, they'd have to dig through layers of truth first. But even as he prepared for a fight, the hits kept coming. Angela stopped speaking to him directly. When she did talk, her tone was clipped, measured. She no longer invited him into post-brief huddles. No more sidebars, no more mentorship moments. It was her way of saying, you made this messy. He was no longer a protege. He was a threat. The only person who still treated him the same was a janitor named Clarence, an older black man who cleaned the labs at night. They'd never spoken much beyond polite greetings. But that week, Clarence lingered a little longer at Noah's new desk. Don't stop showing up, he said one night, pushing his mop slowly across the floor. Noah looked up from his terminal. They can't erase you if you refuse to vanish. It was more than encouragement. It was warning. He understood. Still, the weight bore down. Nights got longer, days colder. He felt the subtle pressure to quit, to resign and let them wrap the silence around him like a shroud. But something kept him grounded. The records. The knowledge. And Maya's final message that week. We've got more. You're not the only one. When you're ready to make this loud, we'll make it louder. That night, as he exited the building, Noah noticed his car had been moved. Not stolen, not vandalized, just relocated. A half-mile from where he'd parked. And on the windshield, a folded piece of paper. You should stop. The note on Noah's windshield said 4 words. You should stop. No punctuation. No name. Just ink. In sharp block letters. On a torn piece of printer paper. He stood in the dark, wind brushing against the side of his face, staring at the threat like it was a puzzle. It wasn't vandalism. It wasn't a slur. It wasn't loud. But it was intentional. This wasn't about fear. It was about intimidation. He looked around the half-lit lot. Empty. Quiet. He'd parked in row C that morning. Now his car sat in row H. Engine untouched. Doors locked. Someone had keys. Or access. He didn't go home. Instead, he drove to a nearby 24-hour diner, ordered coffee he wouldn't drink, and connected to a private hotspot. His hands moved fast on the keyboard, double-checking backup logs, confirming that nothing had been wiped. Nothing altered. Everything was still there. The email chain, the overwritten code history, the unauthorized access logs. By 3:17 a.m., he had added another layer of encryption and disabled his work laptop's GPS beacon, just in case. When he finally returned to his apartment, he didn't sleep. He left the lights off, and sat on the floor, back against the door, listening for footsteps that never came. Then, just after 7 a.m., the email arrived. No sender name, no domain. The address was a jumbled alias. Subject line, for Ellison, they're not just burying you. He hesitated, hovered over the attachment, but scanned it first. Clean. No malicious code. Then opened it. One folder, titled Project Echo, Internal Suppression File. Inside, 23 documents. Reports. Internal memos. Presentation decks. Review notes. Each one tied to a different minority engineer, scientist, or analyst across the last 10 years of NASA records. Each one had the same pattern. A breakthrough idea, a code improvement, a system suggestion, a safety protocol, all authored or initiated by people of color, and all dismissed. Then, months later, each idea re-emerged. Same code, same proposal, slight tweaks, different names.
White names.
Promotions followed. Press mentions, awards, and in most cases, the original innovator had either been reassigned, pushed out quietly, or left altogether. Noah scrolled through each case. A Latinx data analyst, whose predictive model for satellite decay had been shelved, then revived by a white lead a year later. A black woman engineer whose revised failsafe schematic was marked untested, only to reappear during a Mars rover upgrade, with no mention of her name. An indigenous systems integrator, whose report on telemetry lag was filed under low priority before being turned into a research paper co-authored by her supervisor. And then came the last file. It was labeled Ellison Shadow Tag, Do Not Index. Inside were logs, messages, meeting minutes, and a specific note from a senior manager, dated just 1 week after Noah's decimal correction. Ellison's algorithm is clean, but optics are complicated. Let's spread credit across the team. Keep attention minimal. Another line sent by Travis. Can we control the narrative here? Not ideal if it looks like our DEI hire fixed 3 years of negligence. Noah stopped reading. This was bigger than a code patch. This was a playbook. And at the very bottom of the file, a message unsigned but unmistakably written for him. I stayed silent too long. They erased me. Don't let them erase you. They did this to me too. Go public. He sat back in his chair, throat dry. The weight of it wasn't just about what he'd suffered. It was the realization that he was part of a pattern, that this had happened before. Over and over, different faces, same outcome. This wasn't isolated. It was institutional. He forwarded the files to Maya. 10 minutes later, she called. Her voice was sharp, urgent. Do you understand what this is? I do, Noah said. They've been doing this for a decade. She was quiet for a moment. Then they'll try to spin it. Tell you it's complicated. That the process is the process. But this is fire. This is policy violation. Ethics breach. Maybe worse. Noah paced. I can't sit on this. You don't have to, Maya said. I know someone, an investigative journalist. He's done exposés on defense contractors. Clean, smart. But you'll have to go on record. Not just a name. Your story in full. Noah didn't hesitate. Set it up. He ended the call and opened his email again. One more message had come through while they spoke. Different sender. Shorter address. No subject line. It read, We know what you're doing, and we know who you've spoken to. You're making a mistake. Attached was a photo, grainy, time-stamped, taken from above. Noah sitting at the bench near the observation dome, not alone. With Maya. The exposé dropped at 8:04 a.m. Eastern. By 8:09, Noah's phone buzzed so hard it nearly slid off his desk. At first he didn't check it. He just stared at the screen, at the headline that now stared back at him, like the truth finally finding its voice. Inside NASA's erasure machine, how minority engineers were silenced, sidelined, and stolen from. Maya's contact, the journalist, had done it. What Noah thought would take months of red tape and revisions had gone live overnight. He'd turned a dense pile of encrypted emails, suppressed internal documents, and anonymous whistleblower statements into a digital firestorm. No embellishments, no filter, just fact. And the world was listening. By noon, the article had been reposted across 43 media outlets. Reddit threads exploded with screenshots of Travis's "Don't credit the intern" line. Twitter lit up in fury. Noah was right. NASA exposed. Not just a rocket scientist. TikTok creators posted dramatic readings of the article, while showing clips of NASA launches, juxtaposing space exploration with institutional racism. YouTubers launched deep dive videos, and for the first time in his life, Noah's name wasn't being whispered in hallways. It was being shouted in headlines. But he didn't feel triumphant. He felt exposed. His inbox was a blur. Former classmates, professors, journalists, even celebrities. Some apologized for not believing in him sooner. Others offered platforms. One film director asked to option his life story. He ignored them all. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted the system that erased him to explain itself. Back inside NASA, the silence was louder than the public noise. Angela didn't reach out. Raj didn't call. Travis vanished from all internal communications. Instead, at 11:43 a.m., a new memo was sent to all staff. To all employees. NASA is aware of the recent article published in external media. We are initiating an internal review. Until further notice, employees are advised to refrain from media engagement or sharing internal data. Office of Communication. Sterile. Neutral. The language of institutions under siege. But the cracks were already forming. By 1 p.m., journalists were camped outside the Goddard gates. PR officers were dispatched like wildfire. News anchors quoted lines from the exposé while former NASA staff, once silent, started to speak. A former mission lead emailed the reporter directly. What Ellison said is true. I saw it happen for years. Another engineer posted anonymously. We called it intellectual laundering. Every time a black engineer had an idea, we waited a few weeks and whitewashed the name. It was no longer just about Noah. It was a reckoning. Podcasts, news panels, and think pieces dissected every angle. Caltech alumni groups posted statements in support. Scientific journals published open letters demanding accountability. A black astronaut who'd flown missions in the 1990s wrote a viral essay about how his suggestions were edited out of proposals before publication. Noah's experience wasn't an anomaly. It was a blueprint. That evening Maya called. Her voice was urgent, but steady. They're preparing a response, she said. Internal sources say they're pushing to offer you a formal apology, maybe a medal, something symbolic. I'm not interested in symbolism, Noah said flatly. I know, she replied, but they're playing containment now. You're a threat, but you're also leverage. I'm not negotiating silence. You might not have a choice. They'll dangle recognition as a distraction. But Noah didn't want recognition. He wanted revolution. That night, a CNN producer called. We want you on the air. Prime time, they said. He declined. MSNBC, PBS, The New York Times, BBC, all called, all declined. He wasn't ready to tell his story for entertainment. This wasn't a talk show. It was trauma. Still, the wave grew. By the next morning, Noah Was Right trended across 14 countries. Civil rights groups issued statements of solidarity. NASA alumni launched a petition calling for an independent investigation. Within 48 hours, over 200,000 signatures had been collected. But then came the twist. On Friday morning, at 6:12 a.m., Noah received a new email. It didn't come from Maya. It wasn't a journalist. It wasn't from anyone he recognized. The subject line was blank. The sender was encrypted. Inside, a single sentence. The Director of National Intelligence requests an in-person meeting. There was no explanation, just a link to a calendar invite. The location? Langley, Virginia. Langley, headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency. Noah stared at the screen. His first thought was disbelief, then concern, then something else, curiosity. Was this a trap? Was he being watched? Or was someone listening who actually mattered? He clicked the calendar link. It loaded without a password. The message updated in real time. Security clearance not required. You're not under investigation. You're being invited. Invited to the CIA. Noah sat frozen as another email arrived. From a government domain. This one with 2 attachments. The subject line read, "What you found was only half of it." The room was hushed. A congressional hearing chamber in Washington, D.C. Hushed but humming with every suppressed truth. Finally finding voice. Rows of seats sat empty above the dais, where glasses, microphones, and nameplates. Susan Cortez's chair stood in stark contrast to the simmering tension below. Noah entered with his file in hand. Bound printouts of the Project Echo folder. Internal emails highlighting Travis's "Don't credit the intern" line. Maya's compiled dossiers, logs of deleted access, and the decade of suppressed minority innovation. He was flanked by 2 attorneys, faces serious, but their presence barely anchored the tremor in his own chest. The clerk called the hearing to order, and Noah took a seat before the elongated desk of the Oversight Committee. 3 representatives, cold and poised, behind him, only silence from his former bosses, Angela, Raj, Kennedy, who sat together on the front row, looking more like observers than allies. He cleared his throat. "I come before you today, not as a disgruntled employee," Noah began, every syllable deliberate, championing the gravity behind his words. "I testify because for 3 years, I watched a flaw in a navigational model go unchecked, not because it slipped through, but because it was buried." He pressed his palms flat on the polished surface. "I fixed that flaw, and then I was erased." He lifted his evidence. The internal email thread showing the original decimal error email, Angela's forward, Travis's directive to sideline him, the deleted records, all held, not for vengeance, but for justice. Congressman Reyes, the first to speak, leaned forward. "You have submitted." "What?" 23 internal documents showing suppressed innovations across NASA labs, all from underrepresented engineers silenced by policy or prejudice. "Why should this committee believe you're not alone?" Noah didn't flinch. "Because every file is traceable, every timestamp preserved, every name once erased is backed up in duplicates. The deletions were systematic. They weren't rogue. They were instructed." Silence answered. Then Representative Cortez nodded. "We have the documentation. We will begin an independent audit of NASA's internal promotion and project assignment logs. But Mr. Ellison, the agency's leadership is here. Do you believe this was known at levels beyond Travis?" Noah looked at Angela. He steeled himself. "Yes, this wasn't just Travis. It was a culture. The emails named others. The logs show coordinated inaction. And when the headlines went global, when Noah was right-trended, the internal memo didn't acknowledge the failure. It blamed media. That's not leadership. That's erasure." He laid in the full folder on the desk. Cameras flashed from media booths behind him. The previously ignored second-class engineer had become the centerpiece of accountability. They began calling staff internal NASA witnesses. But one by one, they sat in mute compliance. Angela was asked if she'd seen emails forwarded to management. She said, "I don't recall." Raj was asked about the decimal correction. "It was a team effort," he replied. Travis offered only a brief apology for disrupting team communication. But the air held more weight than admission. Then came the unexpected twist. Late into the questioning, a reserved seat opened for a surprise witness, an older man in a civilian suit, standing at the back. The clerk cleared his voice. "Committee, we have an additional witness." He introduced him, Colonel Michael Mike Jefferson, retired astronaut and former NASA safety director. The room shifted. Mike approached the microphone. His face was lined with years, but his voice remained sharp. "I served here on missions, on panels, but behind every press photo, every televised launch, there was resistance to admitting flaws when they hit black engineers. I witnessed one such case in 1999, a minor course correction algorithm, drafted by Dr. Aaron Caldwell, reassigned, rewritten, and repackaged. The model failed a year later." Noah's chest tightened. Another name branded into the same pattern. Mike looked at the committee. "I had proof then. But I didn't testify. I stayed silent. I followed protocol. No one believed it. And then, they vanished him." He paused, gaze sweeping the gallery. "Mr. Cole, your predecessor in mission safety, was there. He saw it happen. He knows how patterns mature, and he asked me not to come forward. He said NASA would lose too much face." The room trembled. These weren't isolated glitches. They were legacies. Representative Cortez exhaled, visibly changed. "Colonel Jefferson, your testimony. This is the first time any of this is on record." Mike nodded. "Be the first." The cameras circled. Cameras that had captured Noah's documentation now captured the face of someone else. Someone who'd kept silence longer than anyone thought possible. For Noah, it wasn't vindication. It was history waking up. Suddenly, the hearing room wasn't just about decimal corrections or nav code. It was about every mind minimized, every voice buried, every truth sidelined under the guise of uniform process. The session recessed. Reporters cascaded forward. The sound of recorders clicking filled the chamber. Noah gathered his files as he stood. The attorneys flanked him, watching the seat of power ripple. Outside the hearing chamber, in the corridor, someone whispered, "You did it." Noah didn't answer. He just stared at the open door through which Colonel Jefferson exited, carrying decades of buried truth. As Noah moved toward the exit, his phone buzzed with a new text. "You're not alone. Look outside." He turned, and against the corridor's glass walls stood a figure he never expected to see. Noah's eyes followed the corridor's glass wall until they locked on a figure standing just beyond the security checkpoint. A tall, silver-haired man in a dark federal windbreaker, arms crossed, posture steady. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just nodded once, deliberate, measured. Inside Noah's phone, the message still glowed. "You're not alone. Look outside." It had come from a scrambled number, but the implication was clear: someone else had pulled a string. The man at the window gestured with a small tilt of the head. Noah didn't ask permission. He stepped out of the hallway, past the exit scanners, through the side lobby. He half expected Maya to follow, or for one of the Congressional staffers to call him back, but no one moved. The noise stayed behind him. The man waited. "Noah Ellison," he said plainly, extending a hand. "I'm Director Alton Shaw, Office of Special Technical Programs. Think of us as the people NASA doesn't put on their brochures." Noah didn't shake his hand. He just stared. "I'm not interested in more secrecy," he said. Director Shaw smiled. "Good. Then you'll want to see this." He handed Noah a black envelope, thicker than it looked. Official seal. Real. No return address. Noah opened it slowly. Inside, a printed internal document stamped "Confidential, do not circulate." It was dated the month before he was hired. The title read, "Proposal for Strategic Technical Remediation Hiring. Phase F. Target Division, Navigation Systems, Autonomous Guidance Group. Objective: isolate and correct high-risk pattern failures within NASA's propulsion and orbital correction architecture. Note: priority is given to candidates from underrepresented demographics as potential cultural shields during post-hire review." Noah read it again, then a third time. "They didn't hire me for diversity," he muttered. "No," Shaw replied, calm. "They hired you because they were desperate." The file continued. Page 2 broke down the Genesis project's internal diagnostics, a pattern of recurring computational anomalies that the agency couldn't afford to publicize. Flaws had been surfacing for years, minor enough to suppress, but cumulative enough to know a system crash was inevitable. Travis's decimal error? Not the only one. There were dozens, and NASA's internal risk models predicted a full cascade failure in less than 3 years, unless someone could quietly overhaul the foundation. Someone precise, young, non-threatening, someone they could reframe if things went wrong. Someone who wouldn't be believed if they spoke up. They chose Noah. He was the cleanup crew, disguised as a recruitment win, a modern-day sacrificial lamb. Director Shaw didn't flinch. "They used you," he said, "but they didn't expect you to win. They expected you to try, maybe stall the breakdown, but you didn't stall. You fixed it, efficiently, publicly, and that's the part they weren't ready for." Noah's hands tightened on the folder. "They brought me in as a fall guy with melanin," he said, voice low. "They brought you in as insulation," Shaw replied. "But what you did, what you exposed, blew a hole in their model. Not just technical, cultural. You revealed that the problem wasn't just code, it was who they trusted to write it, and who they never promoted." Noah couldn't sit. He stepped to the edge of the sidewalk and looked out at DC's gray skyline. He thought back to his first day, to Travis, to Angela, to the decimal point, the glitch, the override, the stolen credits, the erased nameplates. They hadn't underestimated his intelligence. They'd banked on it, hoped he'd be good enough to fix what they couldn't, but not brave enough to tell anyone he did. "I have a right to this file," Noah said. "You do now," Shaw replied. "And I have a right to tell you this. There are more of these files. Dozens. Across departments. Across institutions. You were one of many experimental hires. Most left. Most got buried." Noah turned to him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you didn't leave," Shaw said. "And you weren't supposed to make it this far. You shifted something." Noah stared. "And what happens now?" "That's up to you," Shaw said. "NASA will probably offer you a role somewhere off-grid. Promotion. Title. Silence clause. Or they'll smear you slowly. Either way, you'll be the center of their risk board for years." Noah didn't blink. "I'm not looking for safety." "Good," Shaw replied. "Because this is no longer about one agency." He handed Noah a final card, plain white with a single embossed phrase. National Civil Systems Oversight Board, External Ethics Division. There's a seat opening up, Shaw said. One reserved for people who know where the rot begins. He paused. And how to name it? Noah looked at the card, felt the weight of it. All his life, he'd been trying to earn a seat at the table. Now he was being asked to build a new one. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to the window behind them. Saw his reflection there, not as the outsider they once underestimated, but as the one who saw the flaw no one else could. And this time he wasn't going to fix it quietly. As he tucked the folder into his bag, Noah's phone buzzed again. This time not a threat. A name lit up the screen. Angela Price. And the message read, "You weren't the only one they used. I need to talk. I have something you haven't seen." Noah's phone vibrated one last time with Angela's name on the screen. He let it ring, unwilling to rush into her explanation. Already knowing her call meant shifting the tectonic plates of his world again. When he finally picked up, she spoke with a voice that held fatigue, regret, and resolve all at once. "I owe you truth," she said, words heavy. The hiring document. They framed it as a generational win. They publicly celebrated it. Behind closed doors, that memo described you as an equity shield, someone who could quietly patch a pattern of failures and absorb criticism they thought they'd get. He closed his eyes. They wanted results, yes, but never expected someone like you to deliver them. And then say so. Within 2 weeks of the congressional hearing, the fallout rippled across NASA. The internal investigation went public. Travis Keegan was relieved of duty. Raj Menon resigned, voluntarily. Carolyn was transferred out of active research, reassigned to an advisory role with limited visibility. Angela remained, but under official ethics review. Noah didn't celebrate. He felt a strange hollow victory. The institution's crumbling was not what he had hoped for, but maybe what truth demanded. The revelations triggered a cascade of new bravery. Former employees, emboldened by Noah's testimony, came forward. They recounted erased contributions, lost patents, reassigned credits, and internal silencing. A flood of data led to restoring names in reports, revising credits in archival documents, and rewriting mission logs. Oversight boards were established, tasked with auditing NASA's internal promotion and recognition systems. Congressional subcommittees convened, calling for long-term reform. The scientific community watched. Universities weighed in, demanding broader change. Yet what really stunned the public was the naming announcement. In a carefully choreographed yet emotionally overwhelming moment, NASA released a statement. The next Artemis mission's shuttle will be officially named Noah, in honor of engineer Noah Ellison, the first black engineer to lead final trajectory correction in mission history. In images across social media, Artemis shuttles glowed under new signage. A rose gold plaque engraved with Noah's name gleamed under spotlights at Goddard Center. Teenagers posted TikTok reactions. Black excellence takes flight. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice pushed back. Noah refused to attend the ceremony. He and Maya had spent the morning not celebrating, but organizing. Between blueprints and policy drafted under open code, a newly formed independent equity and attribution watchdog, they built foundations for structural accountability, not spectacle. At midday, Martha Fields of Scientific American published an op-ed penned by Noah. Innovation isn't elusive. It's selective. When credit is withheld, naming a rocket after me won't fix that. We need enduring systems that name every originator. It spread faster than the naming announcement. Institutional gestures, he argued, were empty without cultural scaffolding. That evening, news outlets tacked 3 headlines. Black rocket named Noah. NASA honors engineer behind controversy. Rocket renamed. Race alleged. Was it too little, too late? Ellison declines the honor. Why he turned down a rocket in his name. He did decline it, and the cancellation notice became another news event. Media speculated. NASA released a short statement. We respect Mr. Ellison's decision, honoring his intentions for structural change. A restlessness followed. He didn't want symbolic tributes. He wanted equity that outlived slogans. That's why he accepted a different honor, a seat, offered not by NASA but by the Open Code Initiative. Its board was drafting policy templates for innovation attribution across agencies, the judicial equivalent of subpoenaing credit where it's due. Then came the unexpected gift. 2 weeks after his op-ed, a package arrived at his apartment. No return address. Inside, a miniaturized, handcrafted alloy model of the Artemis Pathfinder. its contours sleek and precise. No name, no plaque, only a wrapper with a single note. You were right. You're not alone. CJ. Noah didn't know who CJ was, and the moment felt right for that mystery to remain. He placed the model on his desk, next to the open code charter. The act felt right, building a legacy, not accepting nomination. He walked out of the office that evening, under a sky lit by DC's low haze. The wind whispered new narratives around him, ones that took root beyond aerospace. Then, as he unlocked his phone, a new email buzzed in. The subject, White House invitation, National STEM Oversight Task Force. In the CC list, 3 names glowed, unthinkably familiar to him. One of them Noah Ellison. His mother. The message didn't have an attachment, but it ended with a line that cut through decades of erased hope. Your seat at the table has always been reserved. Now it's time to claim it. Noah stared at the screen, breath steady, but everything inside him racing. The old gym hadn't changed much. Peeling maroon bleachers, flickering lights, a basketball hoop with a frayed net that hung like it had been crying for years. The floor still bore faded scuffs from sneakers long since forgotten. It smelled like dust and floor wax, and yesterday's hope, exactly as Noah remembered it. But this time, he wasn't sitting in the back, hunched over with his hoodie up, trying not to be noticed. This time, every eye in the room was on him. He stood at center court, under a plastic banner stretched across the upper wall that read, "Legacy starts here." A sea of students watched. Black, brown, tired-eyed, curious-eyed. Kids who were too often told that brilliance had a look, and it didn't look like them. Noah adjusted the mic. His hands were steady now. His voice didn't tremble like it had the first time he testified before Congress, or even when the media swarmed him outside Langley. This was different. This was sacred. Some of you, he began, scanning the room, have already been told you won't make it. That you're too loud, too quiet, too angry, too soft, too not what they expected. A few heads nodded. A few arms crossed. When I was your age, I was the only black kid in my AP physics class. First test, I got a 98. The teacher asked if I cheated. Not because he saw me cheat, but because he couldn't see me doing that well. A soft murmur rippled. I've had code stolen. Credit erased. I had a whole spacecraft launch run on an algorithm I wrote, while someone else accepted the applause. Now their eyes didn't just watch. They locked on. I spent years in rooms where I was the smartest voice, and the quietest one. Not because I didn't speak, but because they didn't hear me, until someone white repeated what I said. Silence. Noah let it sit. But here's the thing, he said, leaning forward slightly, voice calm, sharp, cutting. Brilliance isn't loud, it's patient. It waits, it watches, it builds, and when it finally speaks, it changes the room. The students leaned in. Some of you are building brilliance in bedrooms, on borrowed Wi-Fi between shifts at fast food jobs and helping your siblings with homework. Don't let anyone tell you that work isn't real. He paused. The world needs you. But more than that, it needs to know it needs you. Behind him, on the folding table, sat a gift. The miniature Artemis Pathfinder Model C Jay had sent. Noah had asked open code to 3D print replicas for each student in the room. Not because they needed souvenirs, but because they needed a reminder. He held it up. This, he said, is a piece of a system I helped fix. Not alone, but because I refused to stay quiet. He didn't say NASA, didn't say Congress. He just said truth. You're going to walk into rooms that underestimate you before you even speak. Let them. Then show them. And when you do, don't wait for their permission to be great. He stepped back, hands in his pockets. Let the moment breathe. Then came the twist. A teacher walked up to the mic. Mr. Lachlan. White. Gray-haired now. Still wearing the same tie patterns from 2 decades ago. The same man who once called Noah Devon for an entire semester. Who told him after one missed assignment that maybe engineering wasn't the best fit. Mr. Lachlan took a breath, faced the room. I was Noah's physics teacher, he said. I didn't believe in him then, not fully. But that failure was mine, and today I came not to speak, but to listen. He stepped aside. Noah said nothing. But the look between them was years in the making. One of reckoning, one of reparation. The students clapped hard. And as the room settled, Noah looked out at the crowd, then down at the Pathfinder replica in his hand. He smiled. Not out of pride, out of clarity. He stepped up to the mic one last time. I'm not here because I was chosen, he said. I'm here because I chose not to shrink. And then, the final line. The one that lived in his chest like a heartbeat. The one his mother whispered the day he got the job offer that started everything. He looked right at the students in the front row. The ones who looked like he once did. And said, make them see what they missed. The gym erupted in applause. But backstage as Noah packed up, a student slipped him a letter folded, handwritten. Inside it read, I have something I need to show you. Something they buried. It's not just NASA. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased, just because of who you are, then you know Noah's story isn't rare. It's real. No one should have to fight twice as hard just to be seen. Type yes if you believe brilliance has no color, and every voice deserves to be heard. Subscribe if this broke your heart and opened your eye.